Resident Evil 7 is considered by many to be the scariest entry in the series, but to suggest that one entry surpasses them all, even from a purely horror perspective, is a bold statement, as almost every game in this long-running franchise includes an encounter or enemy type that was designed to frighten players. This was, however, the exact intentions behind the creation of the 7th installment. In an official blog post dated June 14, 2016, the game's developer stated, "Capcom has heard fans' masochistic cries for a Resident Evil game far more terrifying than anything that has come before it. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard is the harrowing homecoming you've been waiting for." This mission statement alone set an expectation for a game that was built from the ground up to be a more frightening experience overall. In this video, we are therefore going to explore how Biohazard epitomizes the series' distinctive brand of horror, earning a reputation for its ability to instill fear in the hearts of players. So join me as we delve into the mouldy depths of Resident Evil 7 and look at the media that inspired its development.
If you get this, stay away.
Perhaps the most notable change that separated Biohazard from its predecessors is the switch to a first-person camera perspective. This was a shift that was met with understandable skepticism, as much of Resident Evil's identity stemmed from fixed camera angles or an over-the-shoulder third-person camera placement. But with the success of horror games such as Amnesia: The Dark Descent, Condemned: Criminal Origins, and the demo for a cancelled Silent Hill game simply named PT, first-person perspectives had become a tried and true technique to draw out the scarier aspects of a game. The prologue section alone presents a very compelling argument for the change. One of the benefits of a first-person camera is the increased alignment between the player and the character we're controlling. In Resident Evil 7, we quite literally step into the shoes of protagonist Ethan Winters, as he arrives at the murky swamp surrounding the Baker estate after receiving a cryptic email from his missing wife, Mia. During this introductory walk, there's an emphasis on atmosphere presented through audio and visual cues. A locked gate followed by no answer from the intercom, an abandoned vehicle belonging to a crew of missing paranormal investigators, strange ominous writing telling us to accept her gift, and decor that's marinated with body horror motifs. Every detail is presented up close to the player, with this granularity connoting a foreboding tone and sense of mystery, a combination that generates both the desire to push forward and a hesitation that holds us back, creating an internal conflict that encourages players to move cautiously. This trepidation slows down the pacing, offering us ample time to soak in the eerie ambience of the setting's exterior grounds. Unsurprisingly, this uneasy atmosphere doesn't settle once we're inside the building. As the door sharply closes behind us, trapping Ethan within a shroud of encircling darkness. At the end of the corridor, a welcoming sunlight penetrates through the kitchen window, but any comfort offered by its increased visibility is short-lived, as it only serves to highlight the building's state of disrepair and disgusting maggot-infested leftovers. The amount of detail placed within this interior space, and Resident Evil 7's locations in general, still remains impressive from a technical and visual design perspective. The meticulous placement of the debris and long-expired food makes everything feel grimy, unclean, and dilapidated. But it also reflects an environment that's been exhaustively lived in, providing some insight into the lengthy time frame between the harrowing events of the past and the date of our arrival, raising the question as to whether Mia is even still alive after her 3-year disappearance, or if she is, what state we're going to find her in. As we enter the living room, we're greeted by a static CRT television, which feels like the game's first nod towards The Ring, one of Biohazard's many sources of horror inspiration. This TV's sole purpose isn't just to inject the atmosphere with a constant white noise, as by placing a recently found videotape within the VHS player, we get to experience the start of Biohazard's subplot, the mystery surrounding the cast and crew of Sewergators, the missing paranormal investigators the aforementioned van outside belonged to.
So, why are we in hell this time? Do you ever prep? What's the prep? Shitty house, spooky sounds? Ooh, is it haunted?
Presenting this backstory through a Blair Witch-style method that remains tangibly in-universe ensures our immersion is sustained. It also mitigates the risk of breaking the elevated suspense that had been building since our arrival, as the player remains in control, preventing us from getting too comfortable, and allowing Biohazard to continue to set up and orchestrate its scares.
Andre! Andre! Clancy, you see where Andre went?
These flashbacks also provide navigational hints to Ethan in the present, which is just another reason why their inclusion feels like something the developers put a lot of thought into. Venturing further into the depths and past the rotting corpse of the Sewergators producer Andre, we find Mia.
Mia, oh thank God I found you. It's me, it's Ethan.
Ethan? Ethan?
Are you alright?
You shouldn't be here.
What do you mean? You contacted me.
No, I wouldn't. Did I?
If you're like myself, your first reaction to this moment was a puzzling contemplation surrounding the speed by which we found Ethan's missing wife. Whilst this should be a reassuring moment, with a palpable sense of relief gained through our newfound companionship, you probably thought to yourself, that felt too easy. And well, you were right. It's not long before our suspicions are given credence through what remains one of my favourite horror sequences within a game. I know the use of ghoulishly long dark-haired entities is a cliché often overused in media. But as someone who had a terrifying experience watching The Ring when I was around 11 years old, seeing Mia crawl up from within the shadowed abyss of the basement really harkened back to the fear of watching Samara Morgan crawl out of a TV for the first time. There's a few reasons why I believe this sequence with Mia and its ensuing escalation is more effective when compared to similar attempts found in horror media. The entirety of this introductory sequence serves purely as a setup for the payoff generated from discovering Mia's possessed state. It's a moment that, despite being featured very early on within the game, still feels earned. Having Ethan locate Mia after exploring a dimly lit and claustrophobically uninviting space created a false sense of security, even down to the lighting of the room she's imprisoned in being brightly lit with warm colour hues. And whilst I held my suspicions regarding her state of mind, I wasn't expecting Mia to become an immediate threat. This sudden character twist as her face contorts and sweats black liquefied mould was also an example of the developer utilizing Biohazard's first-person camera to its fullest potential, as Mia's distressed and hostile expression consumes the screen space with ferocious intensity. After surviving our first combat encounter, Capcom compounds the visceral nature of Biohazard's horror, showing little restraint, as after barely a brief window of time to catch our breath, Mia continues to torment the player in a variety of ways. There are subtle moments, such as her reanimated corpse walking past the adjacent room, acting as confirmation that we are still in danger. And then there are more overtly scary moments, such as her unexpected appearance from behind the corner of a door frame, whereby, in Evil Dead fashion, she quickly proceeds to dismember Ethan's hand with a chainsaw. Which in first person almost connotes the idea that this severed limb is our own. This whole sequence, with its mix of body horror, isolation, and supernatural motifs, allows the developer to begin to broaden its horror design, revealing Biohazard's frightening intentions.
Okay, fine.
The feeling of being afraid is naturally a subjective emotion. Whilst a creator can utilize objective methods to encourage a sense of fear, its effectiveness is largely dependent on the individual. For example, as I mentioned, I have a personal connection to the film The Ring. This history left me with a heightened predisposition to fear anything that resembles Samara Morgan, a trait that allowed Mia's creepy transformation to generate a stronger reaction from me, due to her actions in this moment sharing similarities with the aforementioned ghostly entity. On the other hand, whilst I'm relatively unfazed by gore, some players may possess a phobia to it, garnering a stronger reaction from witnessing Ethan's hand being dismembered. The strength of our emotional responses are therefore relative to the external factors we bring to the experience. Resident Evil 7 understood this principle. It's why I believe Capcom's goal to make this the scariest entry in the series was successful, as it implemented elements from multiple sources of popular horror culture, allowing the game to accommodate a wider range of subjectivity within its player base. This is best exemplified by each member of the Baker family, all of whom represent a different facet of the genre to enhance Biohazard's terrifying potential.
Welcome to the family, son.
Here I come.
Upon completing the prologue, Ethan's hand is mysteriously stapled back together, and we awaken within the main house of the Baker estate to enjoy a meal painstakingly cooked by Marguerite.
It's time for supper.
Who are all you people? Where's Mia?
The company of our host is questionable to say the least, but it does provide the player with their first look at the distinctive personalities of Resident Evil 7's monstrous enemies: Jack, Marguerite, Lucas, and a mysteriously vacant old woman. The unique characteristics of each member of this family is something I really adore about the game, as when relating back to my earlier comments regarding the subjectivity of fear, their variety allows for a layered horror experience that tailors something scary for all types of players. Thankfully, during the course of the game, the time spent with each of these characters is neatly divided into sections. This cleaner structure ensures appropriate time is given to flesh out these terrifying individuals. And not just their personalities, but also their environments, horror sequences, and boss fights.
Shit, he's not eating it, Jack! He's not eating it!
Get the hell up, Marguerite!
I made that for him!
Get the hell out of here!
You're a son of a bitch!
After our nutritious meal, Ethan breaks free from his restraints. Whilst we're not quite alone, thanks to the presence of the creepy grandma adjusting her head towards our ever-changing direction, this does give us time to explore the living space, mostly uninterrupted. As with the prologue's guest house, the detail presented by the interior spaces of the main house remains impressive, even down to the cockroaches living within the drain of another dirty kitchen. It creates an atmosphere that feels intimate. This is something that Biohazard's executive producer Jun Takeuchi outlined as a core component of the game's development.
で、モチーフはイービルデッド。イービルデッドのように狭く深く。イービルデッドは
Takeuchi stipulated early on that Resident Evil 7 was going to borrow motifs from the Evil Dead franchise, specifically the intimacy of the setting. This gave Koshi Naganishi, the game's director, a bedrock to build the game upon, and an easily digestible clarity of vision to share with the development team, something that contributed to the shorter but more dense structure of the final product. But Evil Dead wasn't the only inspiration that informed this game. As confirmed by the game's designer, Morimisa Sato, Jack shares his name with both the actor Jack Nicholson and Jack Torrance, the character he portrayed in Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of the iconic Stephen King novel. But the similarities don't just end with Jack Baker's name and aesthetic, but his audio design as well. When discovered, Jack will chase the player and audibly taunt them from behind.
Here I come. Don't be scared.
Much like the scene where Jack torments Wendy as she exhaustively retreats up the stairwell of the Overlook Hotel's lobby.
I'm just gonna bash your brains in. I'm gonna bash him right the fuck in.
The increased vocal delivery by Jack Baker acts as a method to heighten the player's tension whenever we share the same space as this character. This is especially prevalent in moments such as this, with Jack ranting and raving as he looks for us in the adjacent room.
Where did this shit get to?
And the trapdoor leading to our escape gradually lifts at a snail's pace. His audio cues while searching for Ethan act as a constant reminder towards his looming presence, but they also aid the player's ability to remain undetected, as his voice allows us to pinpoint his location and therefore chart a course away from Jack's axe-wielding mania, much like how Danny tried to flee from his dad inside the maze at the end of The Shining. After narrowly escaping our first ordeal with Jack Baker, we have a conversation with a deputy sheriff named Anderson, who kindly gives us our first weapon.
A fucking pocket knife?
Here. Take it. That's all you gonna get.
Using this knife to open the garage offers a taste of freedom that, much like the deputy, is short-lived, as Biohazard once again flexes its commitment to body horror and the game's first boss encounter with Jack begins. This fight is very effective at revealing the Baker father's invulnerability, with the player shooting him, crashing into him multiple times with a moving car, and eventually setting him on fire, making it therefore horrifying to discover that after all this effort, Jack is still alive, with the detail of his eyes and mouth still moving after his apparent death being an especially nice touch. I also love that Capcom implemented driving mechanics into their engine, only to then utilize them within this extremely confined space. Getting behind the wheel of the car created a natural escalation of intensity, as Jack rips off the vehicle's roof to take control of the wheel. The frantic nature of this boss battle provided a strong juxtaposition against the more cautious cat and mouse style of gameplay from our previous encounter, offering this mix of tone, pacing, and means of survival across the game keeps it feeling unpredictable. There's a little bit of Amnesia's hide-and-seek horror design, with player vulnerability being a central component, alongside more combat-oriented sections that feel reminiscent of the survival horror action found in other beloved entries of the series. It's a variety that prevents the experience from ever feeling stale, while still feeling consistent with the scarier intentions of its development, as the frequent reminders of the Baker family's immortal nature limits any sense of power we could have obtained from acquiring weapons.
Heck of a thing, ain't it? Sure shit beats the hell out of dying. My little girl has given us a gift. And this gift has with me always.
But there is an enemy type that isn't as impervious as our familial hosts, one that's inclusion generated a mixed reception from critics and fans of the series. We encounter our first molded adversary on the way to the basement of the main house. Navigating these narrow pathways as hulking molded enemies appear from around the corners is an appropriately stressful affair. It's also the first time players may find themselves with consternation surrounding a depleting supply of ammunition, as the molded take multiple shots to defeat. In this isolated section, they provide an engaging break by rebalancing the power and offering the player a chance to familiarize themselves with the game's combat mechanics. However, when looking at the game more broadly, the molded are perhaps the only aspect of Resident Evil 7 that I have conflicting feelings towards. Possessing a humanoid structure that has no defining features, aside from their moldy textured appearance, prevented the design of these enemies from ever feeling truly impactful. But I do appreciate that their existence is more of a structural one, providing players with numerous combat encounters to rebalance the experience, with the most interesting aspect of their inclusion being the subplot surrounding their origin. It's revealed that under the influence of a bioweapon called E-001, the Baker family have been kidnapping homeless people and tourists with the intent of transforming them into the molded. These monsters also aren't just reanimated corpses of the missing populace, but instead beings that are reshaped by the mold as it's fueled through the consumption of their biomass. The mold spawning from E-001 is a central aspect of Biohazard, and something that does benefit the aesthetics, due to its contribution towards the grimy look of the game, as corners of the house become blanketed by its infectiously dark appearance. After a brief return trip upstairs to acquire the shotgun, we descend further into the basement to find one of the 3 dog heads needed to escape the main house. But before it's within our grasp, Jack snatches it from the shelf and proceeds to converse with the corpse of Deputy Anderson.
Father. No. I will find him, and I will make him suffer.
This is another moment that pays homage towards The Shining, specifically the scene where, in his increasingly maddened state, Jack Torrance shares a conversation with the ghostly apparition of a bartender named Lloyd.
As long as I live, she'll never let me forget what happened.
The Baker father's similarly delusional exchange connotes the idea that his grip on reality is truly lost. Jack's state of insanity further elevates our fear by reinforcing the notion that, despite his chatty demeanor, this enemy cannot be reasoned with. And if we want to escape this house, we must confront and defeat Jack once again. This allegedly final Jack Baker encounter is appropriately intense, and I've never been more thankful for a pillar to exist within a game. Casting aside his Shining inspiration for a Leatherface one, Jack wields a scissor-like chainsaw as the player has to dodge his sweeping attacks. Fortunately, Ethan eventually obtains his own motorized saw in a desperate and frantic attempt to defeat our aggressor. The final strike felt eerily similar to this scene in Evil Dead 2, as Ethan presses the saw through Jack's face before he explodes into an eruption of gore, leaving nothing but a pool of blood and a collapsing pair of walking legs.
Do me a favor and stay dead.
Resident Evil 7's visceral depiction of body horror is likely to make even the most seasoned fans of the genre momentarily speechless. And despite being reduced to an inanimate lower half, the desire to double check that our host is actually dead remains palpable, a feeling that's not unwarranted. Empowered by the threat of the main house being vanquished, the player is finally given a well-deserved sense of relief and safety, but in true Biohazard fashion, this comfortability is short-lived. As we exit the steps of the basement, we become serenaded by a familiar tune. The unsettling nature of this old woman's reoccurring presence is haunting. Even after multiple replays, her immediate silence upon frailly locking eyes with Ethan is powerfully unnerving. Capcom also utilized the placement of these moments masterfully, with the old woman's unexpected appearance serving as a way to reignite the ominous tone and shake away any reassurance the player was feeling after defeating Jack Baker. It's also a connotation towards the story's remaining ambiguity, creating the idea that, despite our recent victory, the real story and horror of Resident Evil 7 was only just beginning. After slotting all 3 dog heads into the exit door, we finally escape the main house. But much like the old woman's recent appearance, very little comfort is offered by this moment, with the exterior of the estate remaining just as dark, claustrophobic, and uninviting as the interior. Overgrown vegetation litters the foreground, and shadowed splintering tree branches obscure the blackened night sky. A heavy gust of wind penetrates our ears, alongside the sound of a distant shriek from an unknown origin. It's really commendable how Capcom created an outside environment that refuses to break the uneasy atmosphere. Sharing structural similarities to games such as Arkham Asylum, this external courtyard becomes a space the player will frequently pass through when moving between the buildings of the Baker estate. It's therefore fitting that this hub-like location is also home to the game's primary safe room. The idea that a sense of coziness can be obtained from the horror genre feels paradoxical, but much like the warm embrace of a campfire during the recital of a ghost story, Resident Evil safe rooms provide a rare comfort from the abundance of horrors that await outside. As the name suggests, these welcome spaces lack any perceivable danger, offering a chance to organize our inventory, save the game, and re-establish our mental fortitude. In Biohazard specifically, they also provide narrative exposition through dialogue with Zoe, the baker's daughter. Zoe is infected, but has not yet succumbed to the insanity that plagues the rest of her family. She is therefore one of Ethan's few allies within the estate. These phone conversations are both insightful and foreboding, as Zoe theorizes how to synthesize a cure whilst warning us of Marguerite, the Baker family's matriarch.
The old house is near the water. You can't miss it.
Alright.
I just hope you can handle my mother.
Your mother?
Be careful. They'll be looking for you.
The second videotape flashback grants the player some expectation towards our encounter with Marguerite, as we take control of Mia shortly after the events of the prologue.
Find this. I know I can't expect anything from you. Not after what happened. After what I did. But I just want you to know that wasn't me. I don't know what happened. There's so much that you need to know.
There you are! You gave us quite a scare, young lady.
Despite it being a little odd that Mia decides to record this footage, this flashback is an effective sequence that efficiently factors in a multitude of gameplay and story elements. Shortly after entering this newly accessible building, named the Old House, we're given a glimpse at the catalyst behind Biohazard's story.
Over here, Mommy.
After another creepy use of a Samara Morgan-esque trope, the player proceeds to navigate various sections of the location, with this preliminary look allowing us to familiarize ourselves with the layout and position of key items. During this flashback, Marguerite will also patrol the hallways, creating another tense game of cat and mouse between the player and an invulnerable member of the Baker family. The sequence ends with one of the game's most effective uses of its first-person camera, as Marguerite corners Mia in a narrow passageway and turns out the lights.
Where do you think you're going?
Ethan, please help me. Ethan, help me.
Back in the present day, and against our own survival instincts, Ethan must now head towards the old house in search of Zoe's cure and once again his missing wife. The brief walk across the boardwalk of the old house immediately reflects a change in environment, with the hanging decrepit baby dolls and surrounding bleakness of the swamp creating an oppressively creepy atmosphere, especially when combined with the subtle sound of clinking as the dolls knock against one another. It's a great example of a location reflecting the entity that resides within it, as it connotes the feeling that Marguerite's character is a combination of a witch and an eldritch swamp-dwelling horror. Once inside, this latter connotation becomes more profound, as we are attacked by oversized mosquitoes, swarms of mutated flies, and a myriad of spiders that leap out of doorways.
Stay the fuck out!
The abundance of insects within the old house halts the player's progression by preventing the safe freedom of exploration, with the hives they originate from also requiring a surprising amount of ammunition to destroy. I mentioned earlier that each Baker family member was designed to invoke a different type of fear, and Marguerite is no exception. The vast quantity of insects encountered within the old house aims to horrify anyone that has entomophobia or arachnophobia, the fear of insects and spiders respectively. This concentration of bugs surrounding Marguerite is also reflected within her physical design, as she holds a lantern that emanates light. Her wielding of this item creates the idea that not only are the bugs drawn to her, but she also possesses some control over them, contributing towards the character's depiction as a matriarch. Marguerite was once a loving and caring mother to her family. This defining aspect of her personality was then twisted and reshaped by the E001 infection. When we first meet this maternal character, she cooks a meal for us made from dead animals and human remains. Refusing to eat this dinner, for obvious reasons, causes Marguerite to become distressed, not unlike a mother expressing concern towards her child for not eating enough. Later on, when Mia flees from the main house, we can hear Marguerite screaming in the background, beckoning that her guest was acting ungrateful as she struggles to understand why her behaviour was not being appreciated. The bedroom DLC also puts this character trait under the spotlight, as the player has to escape in between moments where Marguerite tries to care for us, preparing different meals she hopes will cater towards our appetite.
Wow, this looks delicious. Really, it looks great.
Oh, good. I'll be back in a little bit to check on you.
Wait, is there anything else to eat?
You don't need nothing else. Now eat your goddamn supper!
This juxtaposition between her horrifying actions and the confused sincerity as she tries to look after her own creates a conflict of emotions for the player.
Oh god, I love home cooking.
Amongst the feelings of dread generated by her presence, there is also the slightest tinge of sympathy. It's not enough to make Marguerite a sympathetic character because she remains truly horrifying throughout, but it does texture her depiction with an added layer of nuance.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong. Stay away. Don't touch her. Don't hurt my family.
It's a similar reaction generated from Evil Dead Rise all these years later, as the maternal character Ellie becomes a Deadite, and the motherly aspects of the character are likewise twisted.
Mommy's with the maggots now.
After surviving a jump scare and a brief combat encounter, the bug-infested matriarch is defeated and engulfed by a black tar-like liquid. With the pathway now cleared, Ethan progresses into the next room and finds instructions on how to synthesize Zoe's cure. This is written above the mummified remains of something called a D-type. This is a prototype bioweapon created by the crime syndicate called the Connections. Something we'll go into more detail about later. But for now, we need to find a D-series arm and head to synthesize a cure, one of which is located on the second floor of the old house. To reach this section of the building, we must first return to Marguerite's corpse to obtain the lantern that balances the locking mechanism of the door. Designing a monster that gets under our skin is not an easy endeavor. A careful balance needs to be maintained between creating something physically horrifying without it looking excessive. In an Entertainment Partners article called The Psychology of Terror, Steve Wang, the special effects artist who worked on Predator and Evil Dead 2, explained, "When I design something scary, I try to reach deep into what are all the things that really creep us out. I try to extrapolate all the elements of what naturally make people scared in general. Then I incorporate all those elements together into the creature designs." Steve Wang's philosophy on monster design shares similarities to the way in which Capcom designed Resident Evil 7, with commonly found phobias informing its structure and monster aesthetics.
Now with me, we're gonna settle this!
Marguerite's final form is perhaps the best example of a monster design found within Biohazard, a metamorphosis that feels like a combination of the Blair Witch from the 2016 remake and the parasitic alien from John Carpenter's The Thing, with elongated limbs and scurrying insect-like movements becoming grounded by the familiarity of her human face.
There's no use in doing that, none. I have.
This juxtaposition is especially horrifying because it combines a universally recognizable aspect of human anatomy with the exaggerated features of an arachnid. Marguerite's screams of rage and blackened eyes generate a similar terror to Mia's transformation in the prologue, but when relating back to Steve Wang's philosophy, we can see the uncanny speed and versatility of her movements extrapolate aspects from the aforementioned phobias of insects and spiders. Her design is more terrifying when considering Marguerite's weak point is also her womb. This disturbing exemplification of her matriarchal design, with bugs birthing from its dense collection of holes, is certain to upset any player with even the mildest form of trypophobia. But it also makes combat in this encounter an uncomfortable affair, as the player attempts to inflict damage to Marguerite's womb after she scurries away to produce more insects. Defeating Marguerite is an intensely frantic endeavour, marking a high point of tension within Resident Evil 7's story. It's therefore appropriate that Capcom decides to flex a more subtle horror muscle when returning back to the old house. After we unlock the entrance to the second floor, we navigate the dimly lit living space belonging to a little girl. It's a section that's used to shift the game's tone from the presence of Marguerite's terrifying dread into another character's creepier unease. This less is more approach creates a nerve-wracking atmosphere that's compounded by the exceptional use of sound design. After exploring the playrooms and their connecting hallways, we discover the hidden compartment housing the D-Series arm and are offered another fleeting glimpse at Evelyn, the little girl we momentarily encountered in Mia's flashback, and more importantly, the source of the Baker family's insanity. This apparition is a hallucination manifested by the effects of the E-001 bioweapon, a tangible representation of its devastating effects, under the guise of a young child trying to form a family with her victims. Evie's design feels inspired by not just Samara Morgan, but also Reagan McNeil from The Exorcist and Alma Wade from the Fear franchise. Whilst the scene of Mia's transformation borrowed touchstones from The Ring, it overall felt more inspired by the Deadite from the 2013 Evil Dead reboot, with the two even sharing the same name. Evelyn, however, is a more exacting embodiment of the creepy child trope commonly found within the genre. After a genuinely discomforting audio cue, followed by a combat encounter with some of Evelyn's moulded allies, we escape and return to the safe room. The phone rings, and much to Ethan's surprise, we discover Lucas, after previously abducting Mia in the old house, is now holding Zoe hostage as well.
Hey, buddy! I thought you should know. I decided that Zoe needed a timeout. She and Mia are here with me.
Setting up the next chapter of the game, whereby the player must enter another new territory and face the son of the Baker family.
Happy birthday!
With the increased threat being posed by Lucas, we backtrack to the main house to search for the keycards required to enter his elaborate maze of traps. Upon our return, we discover the appearance of the interior has somehow worsened, with the mold now spanning the walls and ceilings in an alarming attempt to expand. As the player descends back into the basement, this increased saturation of mold and our own history with this underground section creates an expectation for another combat encounter, only for us to turn the corner and uncover the old woman at the epicenter of this infectious mold, silently awaiting the player in the darkness. This is, in my opinion, the most unexpected appearance of this character in the game. It's a placement that will likely stop the player dead in their tracks at the unforeseen sight of her. Even after all these years, and possessing an anticipation for this one-sided interaction, it was still one of the more chilling moments of my recent playthrough. After sticking our hand down Deputy Anderson, who even in death can't seem to catch a break,
sorry, buddy.
We obtain the keycards and head towards Lucas's location. Whereas the other family members in Biohazard have a greater presence within the playable space, their son rarely shares screen time with the player. A purposeful decision that allows Lucas's chapter to differentiate both his character and the ensuing gameplay by injecting Resident Evil 7 with the psychological horror subgenre.
Ethan. Ethan.
As with Jigsaw, the antagonist from the aptly named Saw franchise, Lucas terrorizes Ethan from afar. After forcing him to run a gauntlet of traps and defend against an almost insurmountable number of molded enemies, he traps the player in a puzzle that feels like a direct reference to the aforementioned horror franchise, providing another pattern to Biohazard's textured horror tapestry. I really wish there were more of these dangerous puzzles featured within the game, as it's a sequence that closely replicates the Saw trap experience. Starting with the design of the room, which is almost devoid of any colour. Its desaturation is complemented by a cold, unpersonalised living space. Even the toilet is appropriately disgusting, just like the one Lee Whannell's character is trapped next to in the original film. The charmless presentation of this setting works in tandem with the subgenre's focus on isolation to create a sense of hopelessness, something that aims to oppress any optimism the player has towards the possibility of escape. This mundane appearance also contributes to the lack of any supernatural and eldritch elements featured in previous sections of the Baker estate. Even our sadistic host is the only Baker family member that could arguably be considered truly evil.
This short? Well, you can't fake this. It has taken me weeks to finish this, and it is finally ready. And it's all for you!
Whereas Jack and Marguerite were twisted by Evelyn's influence, Lucas already possessed a troubled mind. So much so that in his youth, his mother was so concerned by Lucas's behaviour that she took him to a doctor to have his head medically examined. Whilst at school, another child named Oliver referred to him as Crazyhead. As revenge for this name-calling and parallel to our current situation, Lucas tricked Oliver into coming over by convincing him it was his birthday. He then trapped Oliver in the attic above his bedroom. The child died of starvation and dehydration, with Lucas's conscience remaining unaffected, merely noting the rotting smell emanating from the space above his room. It's also important to note, when Lucas traps Ethan in the present day, he has already been cured of Evelyn's influence by the Connections, the same group that created her, with him now acting as their agent within the Baker estate, reporting back on Evie's behaviour. Having an antagonist that is driven solely by his own deranged psyche, alongside an environment designed by its intent, created a scenario that's more grounded in reality. This is an important aspect of psychological horror, because it positions the player in a dangerous situation that's almost believable. This feeling is aided by the first-person perspective of the game, encouraging our alignment with Ethan through the empathy of control. It connotes the feeling that we too are trapped within our sadistic host's nightmarish puzzle. Although we're not entirely alone. Coulrophobia, also known as the fear of clowns, rests high on the list of common phobias. Therefore, when looking back at the insidious philosophy behind Resident Evil 7's creation, it's no surprise Capcom chose to extrapolate aspects of this phobia into the experience.
Hi, Rich. What are you afraid of? Clowns.
Whilst the presence of an actual live clown would have felt out of place against the tone of Biohazard, they did manage to find a minor way to incorporate one. One of the tasks Ethan has to complete, or Clancy if playing the Happy Birthday videotape, is the activation of a sleeping jester. After reattaching the finger, placing a pen within its grasp and winding up the mechanism, the clown springs to life and immediately sketches a password into our character's skin.
What are you doing? Oh man! No!
It's a small moment, but one that still generates a lot of discomfort, whilst directly targeting another corner of the game's player base. Lucas possessing this creepy-looking clown also feels like a nod towards Billy, the ventriloquist puppet mascot of the Jigsaw Killer, but the wording inscribed into our flesh reads Loser, a reference towards the Losers Club in It, the popular Stephen King novel that centers around a malevolent dancing clown named Pennywise. This also isn't the only Stephen King reference found in Lucas's chapter, as the code to enter this puzzle room is 1408, the name of a short story written by King, which stars a paranormal skeptic trapped within a haunted hotel room, with a similar theme of isolation being the focus, as the character wrestles with the questioning of their own sanity. The numerous references found throughout Biohazard demonstrates not only the extensive horror knowledge and passion behind the development team, but also the various inspirations that informed its design. After completing the puzzle, Ethan breaks free, but by the time we reach Lucas's surveillance room, he has already escaped. His whereabouts is a storyline that gets picked up in the Not a Hero DLC, starring the iconic Resident Evil character Chris Redfield.
Game over.
But returning to the base game, Ethan rescues Mia and Zoe, with the latter synthesizing 2 copies of the E001 cure from the D-series arm and head, although Ethan's reunion with his wife is unexpectedly cut short.
Zoe! Get your ass back to the house! I will deal with you later!
This final form of Jack Baker, at least in the main game,
Jack? What the fuck?
is an amalgamation of Jack's persevering rage, body horror, and Evelyn's mold. Similar to the Leviathan's tentacle grip in Dead Space, with its nest of shrieking long-tongued faces, this boss fight's visual design is more disturbing the closer you look. After a lengthy battle, we're forced to finally end Jack's invulnerability by injecting him with one of the antidotes Zoe created, leaving just 1 syringe remaining. In this recent playthrough, I chose to save Mia to get the canon ending, leaving Zoe behind. But as we escape, the baker's younger surrogate daughter prevents us from getting very far.
Fuck! What is that? What is that?
They're mine now.
What?
Awakening on the shore near the wreckage of the Annabelle, the ship Mia transported Evelyn on 3 years ago, marks a tonal and narrative reset, with the change in setting, player character, and confiscation of our weapons subverting expectations by removing aspects of the game we have become familiar with. After playing as Ethan for so long, it almost feels like a disturbing out-of-body experience watching him get abducted by the mouldy abyss.
Ethan!
Also gone are the warm colour hues of the Louisiana Bayou, in favour of a colder blue and grey colour gradient, not dissimilar to the lenses and filters used by Gore Verbinski to produce the visual look of The Ring. Once again, it's also not the only aspect of the film this section borrows inspiration from. Navigating the narrow and dingy hallways of the Annabelle is made all the more nerve-wracking by our lack of defensive and healing items, with the numerous corpses scattered around the ship's bows compounding this, by acting as a constant reminder of Evelyn's terrifying and dangerous abilities. Due to the abundance of the creepy little girl trope saturating the genre, refocusing the latter half of this game around Evie was a risky decision.
Are you remembering?
What? What are you?
As even around the time of Biohazard's release back in 2017, enthusiasts of the genre had already become extremely familiar with this type of entity. The Exorcist controversially frightened audiences and popularized the trope back in 1973. Since then, creepy children like Reagan have appeared in numerous iterations of horror media, with varying degrees of success. There's even a theme park here in the UK called Alton Towers, which structured a marketing campaign around the cliché, with late-night advertisements depicting a similarly creepy girl for the upcoming release of its roller coaster, 13. Whilst not demonically possessed like Reagan was, Evelyn remains just as malignant. Yet despite sharing close similarities, Biohazard does manage to utilise Evie in a way that keeps the experience somewhat fresh for its concluding chapters.
We'll be together forever.
After learning Mia's secret profession and the backstory of the Annabelle's destruction, the player needs to repair the elevator to access the ship's subsections and rescue Ethan. Due to the intricacy and verticality of its layout, exploring this location left a mixed reception on players, but I do appreciate the heightened fear generated from the scarceness of resources. The initially powerless state caused by Mia's lack of weaponry forces us to briefly adjust our playstyle. opting for an experience more in line with games such as Amnesia: The Dark Descent, as I fled from a crawling moulded enemy by hastily seeking refuge in a storage room. This brief vulnerability brought these moulded adversaries back to the more imposing depiction of their first discovery, increasing the danger whilst therefore making the finding of a pistol an incredibly relieving moment. As even though the weapon only had 2 rounds within its magazine, I was grateful to be given at least some form of defense. In this more desperate state, Capcom use a scripted moment with Evelyn to torment players and remind them of her presence. On the second trip up to the top floor, Evie unexpectedly startles Mia and grips her arm, similar to how Samara Morgan uses hallucinations to brand her victims with a handprint. From a gameplay perspective, it reminded me again of how Alma is utilized in the Fear series. The combination of combat encounters and this scripted Evelyn appearance likewise keeping the player in a heightened state of tension, as you never know whether it will be Evelyn or the Moulded residing behind the corners of this vertical maze. One of the aspects of Evie that separates her depiction from other versions of the trope is the character's obsession with family.
Can we be a family like before?
No, Evie. We can't be a family. We were never a family. We will never be a family.
Then I don't need you anymore.
The theme of family underpins the events of Resident Evil 7, being a motivator for good intentions, such as what we see with Joe Baker in the End of Zoe DLC. But it's also Evelyn's persistent desire to find a family that causes devastation to anyone that comes into contact with her. This is different to other depictions of the trope that came before it. Samara was malevolent in life and continues to act on her evil intent from beyond the grave. Reagan was under the influence of Pazuzu, the demon who possessed and forced her into committing distressing and immoral behavior. Alma Wade is motivated by a desire for revenge against the organization that tried to experiment and exploit her psychic abilities. By contrast, whilst potentially being manufactured by the connections to improve her effectiveness as a bioweapon, Evelyn's desire for a family almost feels genuine.
Does it want to be my daddy? Then he can die. Now it's Mommy's turn to kill you.
Similar to Marguerite's twisted maternal instincts, Evelyn doesn't appear to realize the evilness behind her actions. Her tantrums do exhibit homicidal behavior, and some of her dialogue is clearly insidious, a byproduct of her weaponized design. But at her core, Evie is depicted as a disturbed and traumatized young girl, unable to see beyond an obsession to feel loved. Something that likely stemmed from the neglect of the people who created her. It's therefore not unprecedented for the player to feel a sense of sympathy towards Evie, as she unknowingly exposes people to a malicious intent that was designed by others, with the victims she's desperately looking towards for love becoming horrified by her presence. Again, similar to the Baker's matriarch, it's not enough to dilute the terrifying nature of the character. But just like all the initially presumed antagonists in Biohazard, Evelyn isn't solely a villain. Her story is also one of tragedy. Emphasizing this representation further is this bittersweet scene whereby Jack Baker apologizes on behalf of his family.
I'm not gonna hurt you. Hell, I never would have if I could have helped it.
What do you mean?
I'm no killer, son. Neither is Marguerite, nor my boy Lucas.
A conversation that is forged by the father's Megamycete connection with Ethan. Although a brief conversation, it's one of my favourite moments in the game, including dialogue that adds a lot of emotional weight by confirming the player's suspicions that both Jack and Marguerite were ordinary people before Evelyn's arrival. And through the horrific transformations of their characters, Evelyn took the lives of the kind-hearted mother and father. It adds a sense of loss to the game's story that once again feels incredibly tragic. Especially after playing the Daughters DLC, where we witness the family trying to accommodate the helpless girl that washed up outside their residence.
Let's get this poor girl some fresh clothes and into a warm bed. We'll put her in Lucas's old room.
Oh, come on, can't you put her somewhere else?
Oh, Lucas, you just hush. You've long outgrown that room. Always wanted to run a bed and breakfast.
You got your big break, didn't you? Get her to bed. I'll put some soup on.
The irony being that if Evelyn wasn't a bioweapon with a presence that infects those around her, she would have found the love she was looking for from the Baker family.
Hello, sister.
In what I can only describe as a masterstroke of ingenuity, Evelyn's story is given a final note of both terror and sorrow. When passing through the salt mines on our way back to the Baker estate, Ethan enters a laboratory that belonged to the Connections. In this location, we synthesize the E-necrotoxin, a substance that has the ability to destroy Evelyn's cells. But of course, to use this, we need to find her physical form. Reading through the documents within the laboratory explain that, without the Connections' frequent serum injections to stabilize her, Evelyn's body will age rapidly and decay. After connecting some dots, we can conclude the true identity of the Baker family's grandma, that this character was Evelyn the whole time. I personally love this plot twist, the idea that the source of all the excessively horrifying body transformations and possessions originated from this now silent, frail and unsuspecting old woman. And even though her character's significance had been teased throughout the experience, it still remains a shocking twist for those unaware. The fragility of her design also serves multiple purposes. On a surface level, it juxtaposes the hallucination of Evelyn's originally younger form, making the reveal more unexpected. But when looking back towards the tragic aspect of the character, it creates a greater sense of sympathy, because in her desperate pursuit of love from a surrogate family, she became the overlooked elderly member of the Bakers one, someone that even the player likely disregarded as nothing more than a creepy yet unimportant inclusion within the game. It's all the more bittersweet when Ethan injects this weathered version of Evelyn and she beckons out her last words, wondering why everyone seems to hate her.
You.
Why does everyone hate me?
Evelyn's depiction is an intentionally thought-provoking one. First and foremost, she's a terrifyingly powerful bioweapon that transforms into a grotesque final form. Her inclusion also permeates the story of Biohazard with a feeling of dread and defeat, connoting the idea that by the time Ethan arrives at the Baker house, it is already too late. Something that's also confirmed by Mia's note in the true ending of the Daughters DLC. But Capcom also left just enough breadcrumbs to create a suggestion towards her actions being one of a lonely and neglected child, mistreated by the crime syndicate that created her, a group who serve as the real villains of Resident Evil 7's story. Resident Evil 7 is a special game. I've always marveled at its ability to accommodate so many aspects of the genre it belongs to. An exhaustive list of inspirations that combine to make this installment feel like a celebration of horror, but this also felt appropriate for the context surrounding its release. Many fans' interest in this series had begun to waver at the shift towards action-focused gameplay. Capcom therefore chose to return Resident Evil to its roots by using popular horror culture as its blueprint. Yet despite paying homage to films such as The Ring, Evil Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Thing, Saw, and The Exorcist, it still manages to transform what it borrows by injecting it with Resident Evil's distinctive flavour, much like how the E001 Megamycete transforms its victims, creating what is widely considered to be the scariest entry in the series, whilst revitalising the franchise for new and returning players. Personally, I adore this game. I think using Evil Dead as the bedrock for its development was the perfect choice. Its influence affected so much of the final product, from the setting, body horror, and the Deadeye-esque possession of the Baker family. As a huge fan of the Evil Dead franchise, including all of its iterations, there is definitely an elevated appeal through this subjectivity. But what are your thoughts on Resident Evil 7, and more importantly, what character in the game frightened you the most, and why was it Marguerite? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm also conscious that this video far exceeded my originally planned duration, so I feel it's more important than ever to thank you for watching all the way through. I believe our time is our most valuable currency, so I'm really grateful that you decided to spend yours here. If you do wish to subscribe in the spirit of Jack Baker and Evelyn, I'd just like to welcome you to the family. And until next time, I'll see you later.
We gonna play another game, you and me. Oh, ain't life grand?
No! I can't take this anymore! Please! Please, God.